You're listening to the Bare Metal Cyber Prepcast, created to help you succeed in your educational journey. Learn more at baremetalcyber.com, where additional prepcasts, books, and training materials await. Let's get started. Runtime protections represent the last line of defense in modern cybersecurity, providing safeguards that operate while applications are live and in use. The purpose of these measures is to detect, prevent, and contain malicious behaviors at the very moment they occur, rather than relying solely on pre-deployment testing or static controls. In today's cloud environments, where applications are dynamic, distributed, and constantly updated, runtime protection is essential for resilience. Even the best coding practices and pre-release testing cannot anticipate every possible exploit or misconfiguration. Runtime defenses close this gap by observing real execution, identifying suspicious activity, and applying controls that limit potential damage. These mechanisms not only protect against known threats but also adapt to abnormal behaviors, giving organizations confidence that their applications can withstand attacks in real-world conditions. Runtime protection in practice means monitoring, executing applications, and their underlying platforms for signs of attack. These could include unusual traffic patterns, unexpected file access, or abnormal process behavior. Unlike static checks, runtime monitoring deals with living systems, reacting in near real time to deviations from expected operation. For example, if an application suddenly begins making outbound connections it has never made before, runtime protections can flag or block the activity immediately. This real-time visibility ensures that issues are caught before they escalate, much like a smoke detector that sounds an alarm at the first hint of fire, rather than waiting until flames are visible. Runtime application self-protection, commonly known as RASP, embeds security logic directly into applications. By instrumenting the runtime environment, RASP can detect and even block attacks as they occur inside the application process itself. For example, if an attacker tries to inject malicious input into a query, RASP can recognize the exploit attempt and stop execution before damage is done. This self-protective model shifts security from being a perimeter defense to an embedded feature of the application, making it harder for attackers to bypass. RASP essentially equips applications with their own immune system, allowing them to defend themselves against hostile activity. Another foundational control is the Web Application Firewall, or WAF. A WAF filters incoming HTTP traffic, blocking common abuses like cross-site scripting, SQL injection, and command injection attempts. Unlike traditional firewalls that focus on network-level traffic, a WAF understands application-level requests and responses, making it well-suited to protect web-based services. For example, if a request contains suspicious parameters or payloads, the WAF can block it before it ever reaches the application. By acting as a shield at the entry point, WAFs reduce the volume of malicious traffic that applications must handle, lowering the risk of exploitation. A powerful technique in runtime monitoring is establishing behavior baselines. By modeling what normal looks like, such as typical request patterns, resource usage, or call graphs, runtime systems can detect anomalies that deviate from expectations. For example, if an application that usually processes hundreds of requests per minute suddenly spikes into tens of thousands, this deviation may indicate a denial of service attempt or automated probing. Baselines are not static. They evolve as applications grow and change, ensuring that monitoring adapts without becoming obsolete. This approach mirrors how doctors monitor vital signs, quickly recognizing when something falls outside a patient's normal range. Allow lists and deny lists. Add another layer of protection by explicitly controlling what processes, files, and network actions are permitted or prohibited. For instance, an application process might be restricted to accessing only certain directories, or communicating only with approved endpoints. If it tries to perform an action outside of that defined set, the runtime protection system blocks it. Allow lists provide positive control by defining acceptable behavior, while deny lists explicitly forbid dangerous actions. Together, they act as guardrails, ensuring that applications operate strictly within safe boundaries. To make exploits less reliable, operating systems employ protections like address space layout randomization, or ASLR, and non-executable memory, often called NX. ASLR randomizes the memory layout of applications, making it much harder for attackers to predict where to inject malicious code. NX, meanwhile, prevents certain memory regions from executing instructions, stopping attackers from running injected payloads even if they succeed in writing them. These protections are subtle but powerful, forcing attackers to overcome unpredictability and additional safeguards. It is the equivalent of rearranging locks and doors every time someone enters a building, so intruders can never rely on the same map twice. Secure Computing Mode, or SecComp, further reduces risk by limiting which system calls an application can make to the operating system kernel. By allowing only the calls necessary for normal operation, SecComp shrinks the attack surface dramatically. For instance, a web server does not need the ability to perform raw socket operations, so those calls can be blocked outright. This prevents attackers from leveraging unexpected system functionality, even if they compromise the application. In practice, SecComp acts like a strict bouncer at a club, letting only pre-approved actions through the door and turning away everything else. Applying the principle of least privilege at runtime means giving processes only the identities and capabilities they strictly require. This may involve running applications as non-root users, dropping unnecessary privileges, or scoping cloud roles tightly. For example, a containerized service might only need read access to one specific bucket rather than full storage permissions. If the process is compromised, the attacker is confined to a minimal set of actions. Least privilege enforcement ensures that breaches cannot easily escalate, containing damage and buying defenders valuable time to respond. Credential and token protections help secure one of the most attractive targets in runtime environments: secrets. By relying on operating system keyrings or secure credential stores, applications avoid exposing secrets in environment variables or configuration files. For instance, tokens retrieved for authentication can be stored securely in memory and erased when no longer needed. This minimizes the exposure window and reduces the chance that credentials leak into logs or memory dumps. Protecting credentials at runtime closes off a direct path that attackers frequently exploit after initial compromise. Anti-exfiltration controls focus on preventing sensitive data from leaving the environment in unauthorized ways. These controls monitor egress paths, block suspicious destinations, and flag abnormal data volumes. For example, if an application suddenly begins sending gigabytes of data to an unfamiliar external address, protections can halt the transfer or raise alerts. By limiting how data can leave, these controls stop attackers from turning small footholds into catastrophic breaches. Anti-exfiltration is much like border security. Even if someone sneaks into a building, strict controls at the exits prevent them from carrying valuables away. Another runtime defense is dependency validation, which ensures that only signed, trusted libraries are loaded during execution. This blocks unapproved dynamic loads, which could otherwise introduce malicious code into the application. For example, if an attacker manages to slip a tampered library into the environment, dependency validation would refuse to load it without a valid signature. This verification step ensures that applications run only on code that has been reviewed and approved, reducing the risk of supply chain compromises. Integrity verification extends this principle to entire binaries, images, and scripts. At startup, systems can check that hashes, digests, or signatures match expected values, proving that files have not been tampered with. For example, before launching a container, the platform can verify the image digest against a trusted registry. If there is a mismatch, execution is blocked. This prevents altered or corrupted code from running, ensuring that what executes in production is exactly what was intended. It acts as a gatekeeper, validating the authenticity of every component before it begins work. Logging is an essential runtime practice, but logs themselves must be protected. Tamper-evident logging ensures that security events are written in an append-only format with integrity proofs. This means that if an attacker attempts to alter logs to cover their tracks, the tampering becomes detectable. Think of it as sealing pages in a ledger so that missing or altered entries stand out immediately. Preserving trustworthy logs is critical for forensic investigations and compliance, making tamper evidence a cornerstone of runtime monitoring. Feature flags provide a flexible safety valve during live incidents. If a vulnerability is discovered in a specific code path, feature flags allow teams to disable that function quickly without redeploying the entire application. For example, if a payment module shows signs of exploitation, the feature can be turned off while engineers work on a fix. This reduces exposure and limits damage, all while keeping the rest of the system operational. Feature flags turn runtime protection into a responsive surgical tool rather than a blunt instrument. Finally, kill switches represent the most decisive runtime safeguard. When certain critical thresholds are met, such as confirmed exploit attempts or severe anomalies, kill switches allow systems to isolate or shut down affected components. While drastic, this action can prevent greater harm by cutting off attacks in progress. It is similar to emergency stop buttons on industrial machinery, rarely used but vital when conditions demand immediate containment. Kill switches ensure that defenders retain ultimate control, even under the most dangerous runtime conditions. For more cyber-related content and books, please check out cyberauthor.me. Also, there are other prepcasts on cybersecurity and more at baremetalcyber.com. Endpoint detection and response, often shortened to EDR, is one of the cornerstone tools for runtime protection at the host level. EDR solutions observe system behavior continuously, looking for indicators of compromise such as unusual process spawning, suspicious file modifications, or anomalous network connections. When malicious activity is detected, EDR platforms allow security teams to rapidly isolate the endpoint, kill processes, or quarantine files. For example, if malware begins encrypting files in rapid succession, an EDR system can halt the process before widespread damage occurs. This capability provides both visibility and control at runtime, ensuring defenders can respond in seconds rather than hours. Cloud environments introduce additional complexity, which has led to the rise of Cloud Workload Protection Platforms, or CWPP. These platforms unify runtime protections across hosts, containers, and virtual machines, providing consistent coverage no matter the deployment model. For instance, a CWPP can enforce the same set of runtime rules across a Kubernetes cluster, a fleet of virtual machines, and a legacy host. This centralized approach ensures that security scales with the environment, preventing gaps between different workload types. Much like a universal adapter, CWPPs provide a single framework for runtime defense across diverse systems. At the service-to-service layer, runtime protections also extend into the network fabric. Service meshes are increasingly used in cloud-native architectures, and they introduce policies that enforce mutual transport layer security, or MTLS, between services. By requiring both ends of a connection to present valid certificates, MTLS ensures that services can trust one another before exchanging data. Service mesh policies can also enforce fine-grained authorization, limiting which services are allowed to talk to each other. This transforms runtime communication from an open neighborhood into a gated community, where every resident must prove their identity before gaining entry. Network microsegmentation adds another line of defense by limiting lateral movement within environments. Instead of relying on a flat network where any compromised workload can reach others, microsegmentation enforces identity-aware rules at a granular level. For example, a database server might be accessible only from a specific application tier, not from every workload on the network. This isolation ensures that even if one service is breached, attackers cannot easily pivot to others. It is much like compartmentalizing a ship with watertight doors. If one section floods, the others remain safe. Low overhead monitoring at the operating system kernel level is increasingly achieved with Extended Berkeley Packet Filter, or eBPF. eBPF allows sensors to capture detailed events such as system calls, process creations, and network packets with minimal performance impact. This level of insight enables anomaly detection that would otherwise require intrusive monitoring. For instance, eBPF programs can detect when an application unexpectedly spawns a shell process, a behavior often linked to exploitation. By running in the kernel, eBPF provides deep visibility without slowing down workloads, making it a powerful runtime tool in cloud-native environments. Containerized applications bring unique challenges, and runtime controls within container engines provide safeguards. These controls can drop unnecessary Linux capabilities, enforce read-only file systems, and block privilege escalation attempts. For example, a container running a web service should not need access to mount file systems or modify kernel parameters. By stripping away these capabilities, organizations shrink the attack surface dramatically. Combined with enforcement of read-only file systems, attackers who compromise a container find themselves in a restricted sandbox, unable to alter core components or escape into the host system. Serverless applications require a different set of runtime safeguards since they execute as ephemeral functions. Strict timeouts prevent runaway executions, while memory caps enforce resource discipline. Additionally, restricting functions to virtual private cloud, or VPC, endpoints ensures that they only communicate with approved networks. For example, a serverless function designed to query an internal database should not be able to call external APIs on the internet. These runtime controls balance the flexibility of serverless with the need for boundaries, reducing opportunities for attackers to exploit misconfigurations or overprivileged functions. Secrets remain a critical concern during runtime, making secret access monitoring an essential safeguard. These tools flag unusual patterns, such as high-volume retrievals from a vault, cross-namespace secret access, or requests at unusual hours. For instance, if an application suddenly attempts to retrieve dozens of secrets it normally does not use, the anomaly may signal compromise. Monitoring usage ensures that even valid secrets are not abused, giving defenders early warning of malicious activity. This level of scrutiny recognizes that secret misuse can be just as dangerous as secret leakage. Policy as code extends runtime protection by enforcing guardrails programmatically. With policy as code, security rules are written in declarative formats and applied automatically at runtime. For example, a policy might deny execution of workloads configured with public-facing storage or excessive privileges. By codifying policies, organizations ensure that runtime configurations are consistent, repeatable, and resistant to manual error. This approach is akin to embedding safety rules directly into the machinery of a factory. Workers cannot bypass them, because they are hardwired into the system itself. Operational Playbooks guide how teams respond when runtime protections trigger alerts. These playbooks define alert routing, block modes, and escalation thresholds, ensuring consistent action rather than improvised responses. For example, a playbook might specify that medium-severity anomalies generate tickets for review, while high-severity detections trigger immediate isolation. Having these rules predefined ensures that incidents are handled quickly and predictably, reducing both downtime and uncertainty. Playbooks convert runtime detections into coordinated responses that align with organizational priorities. Telemetry correlation adds further clarity by linking runtime alerts to broader contexts such as request identifiers, user identities, and change tickets. For instance, if an anomaly is detected during a login attempt, telemetry correlation can trace it back to the specific user session, the code change that introduced the behavior, and the infrastructure handling the request. This end-to-end view enables precise investigation and remediation. Without correlation, alerts risk becoming isolated events with limited meaning. With it, runtime protections become integrated narratives that explain not just what happened, but why and how. Performance considerations must always be weighed in runtime protection, since security controls that add latency or cause errors can undermine user trust. Effective implementations balance overhead with protection, tuning rules to minimize false positives while respecting service-level agreements. For example, anomaly detection thresholds may be adjusted to reduce unnecessary alerts during peak load. This balance ensures that security does not come at the cost of usability. Just as protective gear in sports must not hinder the player's performance, runtime protections must safeguard applications without degrading their efficiency. Evidence generation provides the audit trail needed to validate runtime defenses. This includes preserving alerts, recording configurations, and documenting response steps. Such evidence supports compliance audits and post-incident reviews by showing that protections were not only in place but actively enforced. For example, an organization might produce logs demonstrating that a kill switch was activated during a suspected intrusion. Evidence transforms runtime protections from ephemeral events into verifiable records of resilience, strengthening both accountability and trust. Anti-patterns, however, can render runtime protections ineffective. Leaving systems in perpetual learning mode without ever enforcing blocks means that detections never translate into defense. Using global allow rules undermines the principle of least privilege, opening the door for broad exploitation. Deploying protections without monitoring in production creates a false sense of security, since issues may go unnoticed. Recognizing and avoiding these anti-patterns ensures that runtime defenses remain active safeguards rather than passive placeholders. For exam preparation, runtime protections should be viewed as layered defenses that align with architecture, threat models, and risk appetite. They extend beyond pre-deployment testing to provide continuous assurance in live environments. From host-level EDR to container controls, from service mesh policies to secret monitoring, runtime protections ensure that applications remain shielded against both known and novel threats. They demonstrate how detection, prevention, and containment can work together in real time, turning runtime from a point of vulnerability into a zone of resilience. In summary, runtime protections bring together behavior monitoring, application shielding, and identity-aware enforcement to create resilient defenses in live environments. By combining technical safeguards with governance, observability, and playbooks, organizations achieve not only security but also accountability. These protections ensure that even when attackers attempt to exploit systems in real time, defenses are ready to detect, block, and contain their actions. Ultimately, runtime protection transforms cloud applications into hardened, auditable systems capable of withstanding today's dynamic threat landscape. Thanks for tuning in to the Bare Metal Cyber Prepcast, your trusted source for cybersecurity news and insights. Remember to subscribe at baremetalcyber.com so you never miss an update. And visit cyberauthor.me for best-selling cybersecurity books that equip you with expert knowledge. Until next time, stay secure and stay vigilant.